Greetings and welcome to Melanomics. I'm your host, JD Garnier. And listen, if economics are the rules to the game that we all have to play by, then Melanomics is the game within a game. A specific way that we have to operate as a community to build our wealth collectively. Listen, wealth is power. I said this the last episode. And when you have power, you have influence over the people that you care about and the things that you value. But when your values aren't aligned, your power is divided. And let's be honest. In the black community, our values aren't aligned. They're conflicted between capitalism and community, between consumption and preservation, and between wealth and riches. And so I'm challenging you to think about wealth differently. You see, capitalism is selfish, but community is selfless. Consumption is irresponsible, but preservation is wise. And rich is luxury, but wealth is legacy. And so you'll hear me always talk about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich is the accumulation of resources and money. But wealth is the relationship between time and money. And so the goal ultimately should be to figure out a way to separate our time from our money. Once we can figure out how to do that, then we can grow our wealth exponentially without the requirement of our labor. And so there are essentially three ways to acquire assets. Assets are the only way to separate your time from your money. You can buy assets, you can create assets, or you can become an asset. Now, buying assets, that should be non-negotiable. That should be a part of all of our wealth creation journeys, right? Buying assets, things that appreciate in value. Things like stocks, bonds, real estate, land, commodities. All of those things should be a part of every plan that you make as you grow your wealth. And the reason is obvious, right? When you own an asset and it appreciates in value, that appreciation has nothing to do with your time or labor or effort. It is separate. And so essentially, you have grown your wealth without an increase in your time. The second way to acquire assets is to create assets. When you start a business, when you offer a service, when you create a product, that's the creation of an asset. The goal of creating assets is to create something that is a utility that people are willing to value and pay for. The more value you get out of that, the larger the asset becomes. So the goal ultimately in creating assets is to create something that becomes a need. But the last way to acquire assets is the simplest and the cheapest, and that's to become an asset. All of us should have the goal of becoming an asset. I don't care what you do. I don't care where you are in life. Your goal each and every single day should be to become an asset. It does not cost money to be more informed, to be kinder, to be more disciplined, to be healthier, to study, to practice, to learn. And so all of us collectively should put ourselves in a position where we are trying to become indispensable to the people that we care about, to the things that we give our time to. And ultimately, that helps us to increase ourselves as an asset. Eventually, that's going to increase your worth. And if it increases your worth, you take that money and use to either buy additional assets or create more assets. And essentially what you're doing is compounding yourself. And so if you don't get anything else of what I talk about today, I want you to leave having in your mind that you need to become an asset. Now, real quickly, if you're not following me, I need you guys to follow me on Instagram at Garnier JD, Facebook at JD Garnier, and Twitter at JD Garnier1. And please subscribe to the Melanomics YouTube channel. Now, my guest on today's show has shown himself to be an asset. This is a man that has his hands in many, many things around the city. He is an author. He is a businessman. He is an entrepreneur. He's a speaker. And I'm proud to call him a good friend of mine as well. Welcome to the show, Tony Bryant.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm honored to be here. And it's no better feeling than having someone in your inner circle, invite you and doing something on such a level. Thank you for having me.
Well, one thing I'm really big on is using our collective networks to grow. Right. And, I've been so inspired by what you've been doing, just sitting back and watching what you've done in the community, with able to navigate different things, different people, different networks. And I think it's an inspiration. So the first thing I want to ask you about is, at this point, I think you're a 2-time author.
3-time.
3-time.
Correct.
3-time author. But your most recent book is called My Daily Bread.
My Daily Bread, absolutely.
If you haven't gotten it, go and get this book. It's on BarnesandNoble.com. It's on Amazon.com right now. You can buy it, My Daily Bread. Tell me about your thought process in creating this book. How long did it take, and what did you want to communicate to the people?
So this book is kind of a hybrid between a devotional and a journal. Excuse me. It's a 151-day read. It's not meant to read all the way through. So you read it over a course of 151 days. And the ideal is for you to develop mental habit, productive mental habit. I ask you to pray, reflect on your previous day, set your intentions, basically evaluate yourself every single morning. And then I offer a 5-minute reading. Now, the reading is my positive perspective on something. You may or may not agree with it, but follow along, because the whole mission of it is for you to develop habit. And once you develop habit, you overall become a better person. So the journey of writing this book, I was asked on social media to share some of my writings. Some of my close friends know that I write every morning, and just asked me to share some of my writings on Instagram every morning and Facebook. So I did that, and over the course of, from January 1st to June the 1st, I wrote every single day, and I turned those writings into a book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. And so let me ask you this question, because you hit on something about just our mental wealth and getting in the right mind frame.
Right.
So this is a podcast about wealth, right? Wealth is something tangible. It's something that you can touch and feel. Tell me how important it is from a mentality standpoint to get your mind in the right mind frame to go after and to receive wealth.
Like, obviously, first of all, like I said, you got to start your day with the best of intentions. Give all praises to God, every morning. Spend a little time with Him. Also, meditate. Clear your mind of everything, and just give your brain room to reset. And whatever your rituals are, take a cold shower, work out, do the things that you have to do earlier in the morning, opposed to just getting up at 7 o'clock and have to be to work at 8. Right. You know what I'm saying? Give your mindset a head start before you execute out in the world. So I think it's very important to how you perceive the day, how you set your intentions for the day, and what you aim to achieve throughout the day. So mindset is very important, even when you're talking to your kids, talking to your wife, and being able to just be effective out in the world. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. So let me ask you this, because you weren't always Tony Bryant, the author, the entrepreneur, the businessman. So tell me about some challenges that you faced in life that kind of shaped how you've evolved today, and really that were the catalyst to getting you where you were today.
Right. So, you're right. We all have our own journeys, and we come from somewhere, right? I come from a lower income, impoverished neighborhood environment, really. I grew up in Crosby, Texas. That's just a little town outside of Houston, east of Houston, a little country town. And my parents got divorced when I was 9 years old. From there, my mom moved around with us kids, and we ended up living in a government subsidized apartment complex, right? And obviously in the apartment complex, I was exposed to various things, impoverished mindset overall, drugs, crime, and so forth. I could have gone in that direction. But luckily, I was just a little bit different. I knew what I didn't want out of life. You know what I'm saying? I didn't necessarily have any mentors or anything, so I knew, what I didn't. I didn't know specifically what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want. Right. So that kind of propelled me to just get curiosity and get involved in different circles. And as I become as I've become exposed to various circles, I'd see the things that they'd have, I see the way that they live, and I knew I wanted different. I go back home, it was the same, type of environment. So I just always, it was always something in me that wanted to do something over and above what folks were around that were around me were doing.
Absolutely.
In my environment.
That's so, what's up, man.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question, and I think we've had this conversation before. I'm a huge fan of Malcolm Gladwell. In one of his books, he talks about people that are connectors, people that are able to get along with almost anybody.
Okay.
Right? And they just seem to have connections in different social circles, different networks. And we all know somebody like that, right? They just, it doesn't matter where you go, they just seem to be able to easily connect and get along, and they just seem to know everybody.
Right.
And I think you're one of that people, especially in the city of Houston. So talk to me about, and connect this to your success. How important are relationships?
I mean, relationships are pretty much everything, right? You don't do business with someone unless you're going to have a good vibe, a good chemistry with them, right? And you call me Connect all the time, outside of this. And I just care about people, man, and the thing is, so many folks, like we've had this discussion, so many folks are selfish about their contacts and about, connecting one person with the other if they don't have anything at stake, if they're not getting something out of it. It's not about that, man. If you genuinely care enough to see somebody excel and you can help them in any type of way, whether that be through a connection, do it. So that's been the key to my success, being able to, not discriminate, not judge, not get jealous or anything. What's meant for you is going to be for you, right? So God, we all have our own, God has given us each our own journeys and so forth. And as we do that, as we become successful people, we meet more people, and therefore you share your rides with I share my rides with you. I share my rides with anyone, that I can connect and make a better person or help them close a deal. I'll do it. So that's been the key to my success.
Okay.
So a little long-winded, but hopefully it did.
Well, that's what we need to hear, honestly.
Right.
And so let's talk about some real business and real numbers. So you're big with real estate, right? And I would say probably in the past couple of years, real estate has really gotten on the radar of a lot of people in terms of ways to make wealth.
Right.
And there's so many ways to do it. Tell me about some opportunities that you've seen specifically that maybe not necessarily be traditional. Traditionally, we think of, buying an apartment complex or, owning some rental property or flipping houses. But there are opportunities within those to make some money. So tell me about some things that you've seen.
I mean, one of the things that we do and I've been doing over the last 3 years is wholesaling real estate. Wholesaling real estate is basically getting a property under contract, at a certain percentage below its ARV. ARV is basically what you're able to sell it for on the market once it's complete and repaired. Basically, you'll get that under contract with a seller, find an investor, the guy who's willing to put the money into the property, assign your contract to them, and basically you'll get an assignment fee for that, and that could range. It could be as low as $5,000. It could be $100,000. It really just depends on the nature of the deal. And then, that's a way of not using your own credit and not using your own money, basically. You just go out and find a property. It's as simple as driving your own neighborhood. And then you get the right deal. You put it on the market or Facebook Marketplace. There's various outlets, and you could use to market the property. And then once he executes that contract and it's closed, you get a check. It's that simple.
Okay. So you did break it down for us, and I have seen it work simply.
Right.
But it can also be a difficult thing to do if you don't know what you're doing.
Right. So there's YouTube University. I have a book. It's called Wholesaling for Profits. It teaches you the basics of. It's on Amazon. It teaches you the basics of wholesaling real estate. Today, you've mentioned, we're talking about real estate, but there are so many ways, to make money, especially for our community. There's no excuse not to be able to feed your family and not to be able to take it to the next level, not to be able to elevate. So wholesaling real estate is one of them. There's, even if you were interested in flipping a property, if the deal is sweet enough and you find the property, you partner with someone, you work with someone within your community or that you know have had success, and you take the deal to them and then you execute. So, if we're not afraid to begin to work together and work with each other or, go outside of the box, of what's traditional and explore different avenues of revenue and ways to feed our family, ways to grow and excel, then, there's plenty of opportunity to do that. So, real estate is, again, one that I've chose. I've been in real estate since the early 2000s, but I've been wholesaling real estate. My team has for the last 3 years.
Okay. So you mentioned something about finding the right people to work together on, and I think a lot of times where we get caught up at is figuring out who's going to benefit and how.
Right.
So why don't you break down for me when you find a partner or somebody to do a deal with, how you guys go about talking about who's going to get compensated, what percentages, how you work that out up front so that there's no conflict and it's a win-win.
Absolutely. What we'll do is called a JV agreement. It's basically a joint venture. We sign an agreement that lays out the nature of who gets what, basically. It could be a 60-40, it could be a 50-50, it could be a 30-70, and that all depends on who's holding the weight. If someone's just bringing me a lead, that could be one scenario, and I'm having to negotiate with the seller and also find a buyer for the property. There's a whole process entailed with that. If you just need guidance, there's a whole nother process involved with that. If you lock up the contract and then all I'm doing is just selling it for you, then it's typically a 50-50 type deal. So the process is typically, you or them will lock up a contract with a seller. We'll take it to title company, make sure there aren't any liens or anything, any title issues, make sure that you're the correct owner, and then we, sell it to an end investor. And once we sell it to an end investor, title company will set a closing date, and everybody's paid.
Okay. Man, Tony dropping some jewels on us. He's breaking down how a deal works, and for me, that's really important, right? Because a lot of times we see the end result. Somebody did this deal and they made this amount of money, but we don't always know the inner workings of it. And if you haven't done it before, it can be intimidating to figure out how to do this or that.
Absolutely. But there's like I said, there's YouTube Universe. There's so many resources. It's no excuse, brother, on why someone can't get that bag, especially in real estate. You'll see, I don't know if it's just me, but I look on YouTube, I see all these experts and gurus in real estate now.
Nowadays.
Like someone's been in the business for a year, all of a sudden they're a guru. So
you do 2 or 3 deals, you're an expert at this point.
Yeah, it's not rocket science, but it does take effort. And don't let me steer you wrong, because some deals, it could take you 5 months to find a deal.
Right.
So but it's about consistency, about truly having a passion to help people. There's so many folks also getting into there's a bad side of it. So many folks getting into real estate without the best intentions. If your focus is purely just money, don't get into this business, because it's a business about helping people.
Right.
So,
I said earlier, capitalism is selfish.
Absolutely. To a degree. To a degree, because obviously we live in America. Of course, we live. That's just the nature of where we live, right? But I said in an interview before, you can't give back. You can't feel like this big philanthropist if you haven't secured a bag yourself. If you haven't been a little bit selfish initially to make sure that you and your family is taken care of.
Right.
So.
Right. That's true. All right, man. Well, let me switch the topic real quick. We all have survived the pandemic together.
Absolutely.
This past year, in my opinion, kind of changed the game of a lot of things. A lot of industries, a lot of businesses really have had to figure out and adjust on the fly. Tell me first about some challenges that you had during the pandemic, but then tell me about some opportunities that you've seen come as a result of what everybody's calling this new normal.
The nature of 2020, I'm not going to write it off. It was not the best year for a lot of people, if you choose to look at it that way. So for me, it gave me the opportunity to complete these books, reevaluate myself and some of the things that I was doing and my missions and so forth, set better intentions for 2021. Got to spend time with my kids, an insane amount of time with probably too much time with my kids and my wife and so forth. But I think it grounded me more so as a person. It just showed me that, hey, we can't really rely on, we got to rely on ourselves at the end of the day in our own efforts, right? So, with the reevaluation and everything that I'm doing, everything that I've been able to do, 2021, I'm positioned to execute and help a lot more people. So to go back to ask me, how did it affect me in the sense of, hardships and so forth. But yeah, business was affected. You got the restaurant shutting down, you got the club shutting down. Obviously primarily we're in real estate. You couldn't walk through houses, so it was a whole ordeal. Right. But again, at the end of the day, we're allowed to reset ourselves so we can execute even on a much greater level going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about the restaurant. Tell me about the club.
Well, we shut down. So that during the pandemic, we made the decision not to serve from the parking lot or not to do Uber Eats or anything like that. We just completely shut down. It was a collective agreement. I wasn't necessarily one to had it been just solely my way, I would have definitely opened up, or at least served food from the drive-thru.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay. Business, it was what it was. Everybody got a little bit of PPP out of it. We had employees that were affected. I hope that never comes to pass again. So
honestly, man, I really think that 2020 was a window for all of us into what the worst case scenario could be, right? And we had to reflect on, okay, what are there gaps and holes and things I've been doing? Are there areas that I've, haven't stepped up on? I think it was a self-reflection for us to figure out and reset life. You talked a lot
right.
about, gave me a tremendous amount of time with my kids, time to think and reflect and just think about the direction of your life. So if you look at it like that, right, it was a negative in a lot of different ways.
Right, absolutely.
But it also could be looked at as a reset, right? Because sometimes you do have to step back to move forward. One of the things I like to talk about on this show is the racial wealth gap. If you're not familiar with that, a study came out a couple of years ago that just outlined the disparity of wealth between the white and the black community.
Right.
Just to give you a highlight, if you guys haven't heard of it, the average net worth for white families is about $117,000. The average net worth for black families is about $17,000. Okay. So that's a tremendous difference. My question to you is the racial wealth gap an individual responsibility or community responsibility?
I think, and this is taking it from an entrepreneur, there's more, obviously money is green and opportunity is endless, plentiful. So I think if we were to, target our own communities, we need to start with self. We need to always start with self. We can't be collectively moving towards a mission as a community if we're not right individually, right? So you got to have some sort of hunger within you and ambition within you to take it to the next level or to chase a bag or however you want to say it, to become more independently, more dependent financially as a community or even as an individual. So you have to start individually first. That's right. What I would believe.
Right. Well, I said earlier, right, making yourself an asset.
Right.
And I'm a huge believer in that because, let's be honest, not everybody's going to be a business owner.
Right.
Not everybody's going to be this entrepreneur wheeling and dealing, making millions of dollars. Right. But if you can put yourself in a position to be an asset, even with what you do, right. You add value, even if it's on a small scale, to yourself, to your family, and then you may encourage them to go out and expand and to do something else. But you're right. I think it starts with us. It starts with looking at ourselves and figuring out how do we maximize everything that God gave us. And, that may be being a teacher and being the absolute best teacher that you can be to spark right. the mind or, the motivation of somebody that's just listening to how well you're teaching them, right?
Right,
And that's
right.
enough for me to change it. So I do think it starts with self, and I completely agree with that. Before we can have a big community plan on how to change that or how to improve that gap, it does have to start with what our vision is individually.
Right, and JD, I think right now in this time it's the biggest exchange of wealth, in the sense that there's so many opportunities, there's endless opportunities for folks. You can be that teacher and be passionate about what you do, but you can still make six figures on the side, doing stocks, or you can do flip properties on the weekend. There's always ways to make an extra income,
Right.
to empower people. With social media, every time I just click it on, someone's saying something positive. Someone's creating some sort of opportunity for you to make an income. Most folks won't charge for it, but there's also a group of folks that don't charge for it, or you can go to YouTube.
Right.
There's
Advice
always
is
a way
free.
to make money. Advice is free, man. So, I say it all starts with just wanting to get better yourself, just wanting to do better for your family. You secure the bag for yourself and for home, then you can help others secure it for themselves. Put your mask on first. That's what they say in an airplane, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
And then you can put other people's masks on.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay. Good, man. Well, let's talk about your other book.
Right.
Let's let people know where we can get your books from.
So obviously Amazon, you can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble. This book, The Power of Mental Wealth, we actually, Johnny Wimbrey actually spearheaded that. There's a number of different authors in there, including Les Brown, Johnny Wimbrey himself, and Heather Monahan. And
Okay.
I wrote chapter 5 in that book.
Okay. All right. And My Daily Bread. Both
Yes,
of these
sir.
are available on Amazon?
Absolutely. They're available right now if you want to. And I donate 100% of those proceeds, by the way. So whatever's made on this particular book, My Daily Bread, which is, like I said, is a great read. I'm not biased. I donate 100% of the proceeds. So, what Tony and his wife, he lost his son and his wife last year. That situation. But his son was going to a private school, Regis, and right now we're developing a scholarship fund, and 100% of proceeds from my book goes to that scholarship fund. So,
That's a blessing, man. You're already doing it in the community.
right.
If you haven't done it, please go and get My Daily Bread and go and get The Power of Mental Wealth.
Right.
These books, I've read them. They're going to change your mindset, change the way that you think. And, man, I want you to wrap this up, just giving the people some words of encouragement.
Hey, man, the best thing you can do, you can pour more into yourself than you could ever do you can pour more into yourself than you can ever put in the bank account. So just go out there, don't be afraid to evolve, to believe, and actually just figure out what your passion is, figure out what your purpose is, and have a true desire to win and to go and get it and achieve whatever that is. So just believe in yourself. My boy got his podcast. He always wanted one. He got it, and I'm actually on it. So I'm grateful for that and grateful for what the rest of 2021 has to bring.
Man, I appreciate you being on, my brother. For sure. I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you.
So I want to end this podcast off with just a story. And it's a story that one of my mentors tells about his childhood. And when he was a kid, him and his brother would catch the bus to and from school. And when they would get off the bus to go home, they would walk about 2 blocks. And every single day, they would pass up the same house. And in the house, behind the yard, there was the biggest, meanest, most vicious dog that you ever wanted to see. But it was on a chain, and it was behind the gate. And so every day they would pass this house, and they would see the dog behind the fence on the chain, and they would antagonize it. They would stump their feet at it. They would kick at it. They would bark at it. They would throw rocks at it. And the dog would get up, and it would come charging at them full speed, right up until the point that the chain would jack its neck back. And it would fall down, and it would get up, and it would start barking at them viciously. And they would just run home. And every single day, they would pass this house, and they would see this big, huge, vicious dog on a chain behind the gate, and they would antagonize the dog. They would bark at it. They would stump their feet at it. They would throw rocks at it, and the dog would get up and come charging at them full speed. And the chain would jack its neck back, and it would stand up, and it would start barking at them viciously. And this happened every single day. And then eventually, The dog got smart. And they would get off the bus and they would walk home and they would see the house and they would see the dog and they would antagonize it. They would bark at it and throw rocks at it and kick their feet at it. And instead of getting up and running, the dog would get up and he would slowly walk right up until the point that the chain would normally jerk his neck back. And it would stop right there and it would start barking at him. And they would just take off and run home. And this happened all school year, from the fall to the winter to the spring. And one day, just like any other day, they got off the bus, they were walking home, and they saw the house, and they saw this huge, vicious dog, and they started antagonizing it. They started barking at it and stumping their feet at it. But what they didn't realize was that the chain was off and the gate was open. And when they finally recognized, they were paralyzed with fear. They could not move because everything that this dog had been thinking about doing to them, there was nothing but space and opportunity for him to do. And he looked at them dead in their eye, and he walked to them slowly, and he stopped right at the point that the chain would normally jerk his neck back, and he started barking at him. And when they realized what was going on, they took off and they ran home. You see, the dog was free, but he didn't know it. He was free to do everything that he had dreamed about doing, but his mind was conditioned to believe that he had a chain around his neck and a gate in his path. And I like to tell that story because how many of us are conditioned mentally believe that there's something holding us back and there's something blocking our path? And I want to communicate to you before I get off this podcast that you're free to do anything that you've dreamed about doing. There's nothing holding you back. There's nothing blocking your path. The only thing stopping you from pursuing everything that you've been dreaming about is space and opportunity. And so the only thing you have to do is figure out how to recondition your mind to know that there's nothing holding you back and there's nothing blocking your path. And with that, thank you guys for tuning in to Melanomics. I'm your host, JD Garnier. Make sure you follow me on Instagram at GarnierJD, Facebook at JD Garnier, and Twitter at JD Garnier1. And please subscribe to the Melanomics YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.